I realized that it was no mic. Okay, hello.
Hi.
Today we are starting our podcast 29, and we will be talking about multiple losses and how do we cope with losses that are not just singular. In our previous podcast, we talked about losing our loved ones, losing relationships. We talked about losing jobs, losing business. But when we started our podcast, for some reasons, I thought immediately of Summer Echo. And the reason for that was that Summer, we met you at Marco Polo restaurant, and you were our very first waitress. And when COVID started, I thought, and many restaurants closed, I thought that would be so interesting that Summer probably is out of business. And you are very precious to us, to our church, to Francis Street First. And again, I welcome you today when you will be sharing about how you cope with multiple losses. And I also see that Tiffany Greg join us today. She will be one of our moderators. She is a Missouri public defender. It's wonderful to have you, Tiffany, with us. And we're excited because you will be our guest in January. And you will be talking more on a particular topic. But today, since we talk about multiple losses, I thought your presence will be so important. So welcome Candy, welcome Scott, and welcome Summer. So Summer, you are a very interesting person. And when you will be talking, I will bring you solo on the screen. The reason I said you're a very interesting person is that, as I said, you were our waitress at Marco Polo, and Marco Polo is a very unique place in St. Joseph, Missouri, because this place is very diverse. And the reason Scott and I went there, because the cuisine, and I hope you will tell us more, because I think it's a wonderful illustration of American life. It's kind of a diversity and also different flavors and different colors. So when we've met you, you matched the imagination that we had, that expectation of the place. But little did we know that you also have the most beautiful, majestic voice. And so this is how our friendship started. And I remember that how many times you sang a little song for us, especially when it was a birthday, and I brought my children there. So we're excited to hear your story. Welcome, Summer.
Thank you. I am actually at Marco Polo right now. Dean has been wonderful enough to let me do the interview here at work before I start my shift. So I just want to, So I work at Marco Polo when I really love my job. I really love the people I work with, and I enjoy getting out and meeting my customers. Like, a lot of them become my longtime friends. And so when COVID happened, I think losing a job for me wasn't just about, not having money, which hit everybody, but also you lose your work family. And I think some jobs are more inclined to that than others, but in the restaurant industry, sometimes you really do become family with the people you work with. So so that was hard, having to lose my work family and my job.
But so tell us, since when I thought of you to be our guest, I did not know how many things you actually had to deal with. And
Yes.
I always look at your Facebook page, and it's always so bright and so joyful. And since your voice is so joyful, and your posts on Facebook are usually are very positive. And one post especially got my attention because you talked about, and I'm sure you reposted it, but it talked about how infrequently, how rarely actually people talk or say that I'm really happy. Maybe we can start there because you express this joy about around yourself, and you just exude it. So tell me, what is your resource? How do you cope with difficulties that
Yeah.
does not even
Okay.
show on your face?
Sure. Well, since we're talking about that, I can give a little more backstory. So, yes, when COVID happened, actually, first of all, we had just immigrated back here. We lived in Canada for 13 years, so we just came back. We had this job that I had here. Really, I am a singer. I love singing and performing. That's a big outlet for me. Um, so, since March, yeah,
Mm.
my job in a short time. Um, but I did post that on Facebook, and that wasn't just like me pretending to be happy, or sometimes I think choosing choosing joy it is a choice, and I think we can really actually rewire our brains to. There's a few ways you can do that. One is learning how to grieve well. I think in order to be happy, you have to learn how to be sad, and that might be counterintuitive. But the truth is, you can't just pretend to be happy because sad things happen. I've had a lot of sad things happen.
Absolutely, and don't take
I
me wrong because
so I
when,
kind of
yeah,
would
go
like to
ahead.
start, if it's okay.
Yeah, I think
No, no.
you
I
mentioned
was
that
just
you
going to say
had
I'd like to start
internet
with
connection
talking about
problem.
grief.
Okay.
Oh. Is it being choppy on your end? Is that better?
Yes, absolutely. It was a little connection problem, and you mentioned before that you were late because you had internet problem. So it seems like you're okay now. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay, okay. Yeah, so I think to start with is I've learned a lot actually right this last year about grief, and about feeling your sadness. Because if you just try to ignore it or pretend like it's not there, then it's going to show up in other ways. Um, so,
Mm.
so I and um, learning what to do with that sadness and that grief. So for me, when I realized that was a lot like um, when childbirth, when you have birth pains and they come in waves, and you kind of have the option of fighting it. At the end of that, you birth a new life. And I realized the sorrow is very much the same way. When the sorrow comes in waves, which it does, just letting it happen and not trying to fight it or, um, you know, rationalize it away, but just let it happen, and acknowledge that it's actually doing something, it's doing a good work, even if it doesn't feel like it right away. So I think acknowledging my grief and my sorrow was really important. And then when you do that, it frees you up to just.
I still have a little connectivity problem. Do you, everybody? Yes. So, Summer, I have a question to you. Maybe that will help. You mentioned that you grieved. So maybe you could tell us your story. What happened? You mentioned also March 2020. when you, in a way, knew what will happen, and then did you expect it will be that bad? But also in your personal life, it was something that was like piling up, one thing after another. And I know that our viewers are really struggling now, because it's one thing to be away from family, but it is when you lose your job, you lost your performance opportunity. Since you are a singer, many musicians lost their gigs, could not perform, and for many of them, this is the only source of their income. And we have lots of musicians among our friends, and we just know how hard it is. So, but also you had more things happening to you. So, could you share with us today that our viewers will relate and see that somehow you still manage your life and you still find some way to cope? And what is that, your way of coping, that maybe we can learn today? Since we've learned from the very beginning that coping is a skill, and skill can be learned. So please share with us.
Yeah, well, I think, can you guys hear me okay? I know we're having connection
I can hear
issues.
you
Now
now.
we do.
I
Yeah.
can hear you now.
Okay. I
Yeah.
think the first key to coping for me is learning how to deal with the big, we would call them negative emotions. And negative emotions aren't always, they're not bad emotions, but they are big, and we don't always like them. So I think finding, when you feel sad, let yourself feel sad, let yourself grieve, let yourself cry. When you're angry, anger is a hard one for me, because what do you do when you're angry? You can't, that's not always as cut and dry, but for me, physical outlets for your anger are really, really important. I don't mean like beating people up. I mean, um, like getting the anger feelings out of your body, because we do store anger in our body. We can store sorrow in our body. So moving around, just like actual physical exercise, physical release, dancing. I started gardening this summer, and I made this massive garden, and I just dug in the dirt, dug and dug and dug and dug. And that's another thing, is getting close to nature when we're actually in the earth and we're grounded in the earth. So I think not trying to hide from your negative feelings, not trying to repress them, but acknowledge them, understand that they are a part of you. That's the first step. And then I just, man, there's always a million things to be thankful for. And like, yes, I could talk about the things that I've lost, but I have gained like so much more than that. And like for everything that I've lost, I can look around and say, yeah, but I have this and I have that and I have that. Part of that, you can rewire your brain to think that way. I mean, some people are born more inclined to that. That's true. But
That's
if
true.
you're not inclined to that, you can actually change the wiring in your brain to be inclined to that. And thankfulness is not a trite thing. It's not just be thankful. And actually, neuroscience proves that choosing to be thankful makes those neural pathways stronger. And then it makes you more positive, which in turn makes you more healthy, which in turn makes you feel better. So I think just acknowledging my bad feelings, not trying to run from them, understanding that they have to happen. They're doing good. They have a purpose to accomplish. And then choosing to be thankful, because there's always something to be thankful for. Always.
Can
So
I
tell
ask
us, what are you thinking? Oh, go ahead, Candy. Go ahead.
Well, I was just very curious. Did you grow up in St. Joe then, Summer? I didn't quite catch that, because I can't imagine coming to St. Joe, Missouri from Canada. It's kind of like Lydia coming from Russia and ended up at St. Joe. I just don't get it. So tell me that part of your story just a little bit. What were you doing and what led you here?
I did. Well, I grew up in St. Joe when I was a little kid.
Okay.
And so my family's here. When I was 18, I went to Bible college in California, and that's where I met Price. And we moved up to Canada, and we lived there together for 13 years. Then we decided to move back to Missouri. So, yeah, it's very different. It is very different, but they both feel like home now.
Well, good.
That is an excellent question, Candy, because moving and leaving your family behind is also requiring lots of strength. and also lots of curiosity. And I think curiosity is one of the important things when we cope. Because when we cope and we just lose perspective and hope and we don't look into the future with that curiosity, what is still there? Many of us simply get depressed and angry, like you said. But when you were in Canada, what did you find most difficult to cope with? Was it language? Was it like a
Yeah,
living
that was really
environment,
hard.
money?
Yes, when I went to Canada, so I was 19 when we got married. By the time we drove from Missouri to Canada, I was pregnant. So by the time we got there, so I was away from all of my family, uh, pregnant. We had nothing. We were so poor, and the hardest part it was definitely just the missing my family because. And I mean, culturally, people don't think Canada is as different as it is. Where I lived was very, very wealthy city, very liberal city, and I grew up in St. Joe. Um, so it was very different. It was shocking on a lot of fronts. But
So, what was the most shocking
yes,
thing?
it was hard.
Especially since it was a liberal city. What was shocking?
Okay, well, I like to tell this story. We had just moved there, and Price took me out to eat for dinner, and I was like, "Cool, we're going to dinner." And as our server comes over to us, I just like got these bug eyes, and I was like, "Oh, he took me to like a Hooters or something, like some kind of a bad restaurant." Like
Oh no.
I really thought that the girls were like that was the kind of restaurant it was, and I was just aghast, and I was like, "Why did you take me here?" And then I realized that that was just how they dressed, and that it was not anything untoward, but like halter tops and mini skirts and high heels was how all the servers dressed in those kind of restaurants. So that was funny, and in retrospect, at first it was a little bit like I was like, "What are you doing?" Um,
Uh,
so that was a big example, and people don't realize that like the Midwest is very conservative, and so so that was funny.
So, when you came back, oh, go ahead.
I
Candy
had
has a
another
question.
question because when I got married, before we had been married a year, I had a baby and we were living in San Diego and I had no family. One of the first things I did during the first week was call home crying saying, "Send help." And my sister came out and stayed with me. Did you find a support system in Canada or how did you survive that on your own?
Um, I was pretty stubborn.
Oh,
I, I didn't want to. I didn't want to go back ever. I really felt like God had called me there, and I was young and naive and full of zeal. And my mama did come up when I had my first baby. She came and stayed with us for a couple weeks, and oh man, I couldn't have done that without her. I remember the first night she left, like after I had the baby, we brought the baby home. Her name's Grace. That was 13 years ago. And she was like, "Okay, there you go." And she went to leave, and we stopped, and we're like, "Don't, what are you doing?"
yeah.
And she's like, "No, you guys got this now."
Yeah.
So, but
So,
yeah,
what did you
honestly,
find?
it was just a hard
So,
decade.
what did you find most difficult to accept when you came back to St. Joseph from Canada? Was it anything you struggled with?
Uh, yes, I really miss the water. I miss the beaches. I miss I miss the art scene. I miss my opera company.
Mm.
That's about it.
Okay, so then now tell us about your comparison with the restaurant that you just described in Canada. And then here you are. Is it your very first business working as a waitress at Marco Polo, or you worked somewhere before as a waitress?
um, I've done serving off and on since I was 16. That was kind of my go-to
Yeah,
extra job. So
sure.
I have worked at a dozen different restaurants throughout the years.
Well, the entertainment business and restaurant work goes hand in hand. Musicians often, in my experience, end
Yes,
up.
it does.
It's very easy to get such a job and very easy to move on to another one. Usually.
But so did you ever perform at Marco Polo?
Yes, and no, not officially. Mm-mm. I sang with my
Oh.
sister. We did a little concert back in the lounge once, but that was kind of just a small thing.
But so then the COVID came and the restaurant was closed for a while. Am I right?
Mm-hmm.
So then what happened?
Yeah, yes, like quite a while.
And how did you handle it?
Um, yeah, well, not. I think I've repressed those memories.
You just
not really.
Go ahead.
It was,
Not really.
no, I actually, we had this big gravel pit in our backyard, and it was someone had just filled it with rocks. So I started shoveling rocks one day. I shoveled probably 20 wheelbarrowfuls of rocks,
Oh my!
and bought a bunch of dirt and filled it, and I planted this massive garden. Then I offered my services to the community if anyone wanted help with that kind of like physical labor of just putting in a garden. I just offered to go and help them plant seeds and till dirt so that they could have a garden to work on during the shutdown. So I did some of that for for people in the community. That was actually wonderful because it was methodical and it was physical labor and it was very meditative and prayerful for me while I was doing that. And so that was probably the biggest thing that helped me cope during that time.
Very interesting. And so then you did not experience any loss of the music performances after COVID started, did you?
Any more loss?
Yes, like since you're a musician, we talked about how hard it is for musicians to lose any opportunities to perform. So how many gigs, for example, did you have since you had to go to some of the physical labor since COVID
Right.
started? So how did you handle this all? A young woman, you have how many children?
I
I think we're having, yeah, go ahead. How many?
3.
There you go.
3 children. Wow. Okay. So, oh wow, 3 children. My goodness. And so, and now you are separated or you are going through a divorce?
Yes.
Yes. So, and on the bottom, I'm running a banner since Tiffany Greg is a Missouri public defender. And as I said, Tiffany will be our guest in January, very first Saturday of January. I thought that your situation maybe not necessarily has serious issues with, when people need legal advice. But when I talked to you, Tiffany, you offered help that when people call, and imagine during COVID, they face some legal issues, and that could be about many things. Maybe then I am asking our viewers to ask questions while Tiffany is here with us today, moderating this event, that maybe at the end you can answer questions about legal situations also. But so question back to you, Summer. How did you handle your, I realize that you're going through divorce, right now? Okay. And I know
Yes.
that during COVID, lots of people are really separating, splitting, and filing for divorces. But I just also know how hard it is. Many cases are postponed, judges die, I've learned. and or are sick with COVID or any other health issues, and so cases are absolutely postponed for indefinite time. So it's very, I think it's very even more stressful when you try to resolve some issues in marriage to wait for a resolution. So how it is in your case? How did it work, if I may ask?
Sorry, can you repeat the
Yeah,
question? The
I
last
know
part
that.
of it I didn't catch.
Okay. Um, so I'm just asking about how difficult it is to handle legal issues during COVID, and maybe then Tiffany will help us to talk a little about that.
Uh,
Yes,
it is hard not being able to talk to a lawyer really face to face.
So here we have Tiffany Greg.
You
Let's
have
see,
to do
maybe she can.
everything
Yeah,
over the phone
yeah,
or through.
yeah.
Um, yes, there is a significant delay in the court system right now. Most courts are shut down, and when they were shut down, it has left criminal cases where people are in custody for much longer than they would have otherwise been. And so civil cases are going to kind of take a back seat to the criminal cases. But that can actually be very favorable for someone going through a divorce or a separation. I think it is best for everyone involved if by the time that you're talking to the lawyer that you have just the initial hurt out of the way and that you're able to work and compromise for what's best for yourself and your children. And also, judges tend to look a lot at the custody agreement or the custody situation that you already have happening. And so, if you've already worked it out to where your partner is having or your ex-partner is having the children so many days per week, and that seems to be a system that's working well, then it is really good. And the judges are usually tending to follow that. A lot where people are actually having problems are where they already have custody decrees and then parents aren't following them and just withholding the children from the other person, and they can't get into court to enforce the custody agreement. And so that can be really problems and stuff. But if you do have a custody agreement already, you can go file a family access motion at the court, and that is taken up quicker than a divorce or a custody case. So that's important to know. But there are online classes. There are classes that you will have to take as a part of the divorce about dealing with children. And you can go ahead and get those out of the way now. I will provide the website next time. It's just about learning how to co-parent. And it's something that everyone who's going through a divorce that has children, they have to take those classes. And it's actually very beneficial. It helps with co-parenting. There's co-parenting apps that you can use if you and your partner are not able to speak or co-parent in a way that isn't detrimental to you. Then you can just do apps where you're putting the children's events into the apps and both parents are able to see it. You can communicate through the app, and it records all of that, and that's important for the court to see, and also limits your interaction with the person that you're going to court with. But it also just gives you some time for it to simmer down. And so I know that with everybody involved with the court system, they think the quicker, the better, the faster, let's get it done. But actually sometimes slowing things down and letting negative emotions kind of settle and getting into a routine to where you're not going into this raw. You're probably going to have your first Christmas now without being a family unit. And that's going to be a very difficult time for you. And once you get through that and you've gotten into a routine, I think that it's going to make the divorce proceedings, if you actually end up there, much easier to get through. And it's going to be a less tumultuous process because you will have been doing this throughout the time. And it's always better, I think, for the parents to be the ones who make up the custody agreements because you know your children and the judge doesn't. And so if you can come to a place where you guys can make decisions together about what's best for the kids, that is very beneficial. So given the extra time to be able to do that, I know that it seems like a very negative thing, but it can be positive. And you do have to take the time to grieve the loss that you're having. I mean, it is a tremendous loss, and Christmas for your children and for yourself are going to be very different. Thanksgiving is going to be very different. I also am separated, or I'm not with my children's father either. And so knowing that I'm not a part of every decision that's made for them, and I don't get to see every part of happiness or make a decision about everyone that's around them, those are all very new things for people who are separated. Because before you were a unit and you were making every decision about the children together, and you're getting to be a part of their everyday lives. So there's a lot of transition that has to happen. And the part that you can look at as being fortunate is that you're going to be going through that transition before you come to the divorce. Now, if there are abuse issues or neglect issues or anything of that nature, then there are emergency situations that you can take, which would be filing for a motion and for our ex parte, saying, I don't want him to be around me or around the children. And definitely, if there are abusive situations that can't be handled, then you can contact the women's shelter. They can assist you with that. You can still go up to the courthouse and file for expertise, and those are still taken up. They'll handle those meetings by WebEx. Those are definitely issues that you can't just handle on your own. But for the most part, for people just learning the transition, accepting the loss in how your family is run, and the involvement that you get to have with your children, I think it's a transition, and I think that you'll be very lucky, and your case will be handled more efficiently and more in your hands, and actually it will be less expensive once you've already gotten over the rocky parts while you're kind of waiting on the case, if you've gotten through that by the time that you're coming to the divorce proceedings.
Tiffany, that was very helpful. Thank you. I think
that is very helpful. But I have a question to both of you, Summer and Tiffany. So what causes people, why COVID provoked and in a way made people think about splitting? And I know that divorces are very common and couples file for divorces or separate all the time. But it just shows that during COVID, more divorces take place. So what do you think is affecting relationship during this time?
Summer, was your divorce, was that something that was initiated, or the separation or wanting to separate, was that something that occurred due to COVID?
No, in my situation, we had actually already been separated for several months before COVID happened. The plan was to reconcile and get back together, and then that didn't happen. But so it became official in like April, right after COVID happened. But
right.
But I do know, like, my aunt works with domestic violence victims, and so she says that, she's talked to me about how much more domestic violence there is right now. And I think it's just because people have to be together more. And you have to be together in crisis, and you don't have the usual things you can turn to cope or to distract yourself. So I can see how it definitely has exacerbated underlying issues for a lot of people.
And I think it's one of two things. I think one, that there are probably a lot of extra stressors on marriages right now. That you have children who are out of school and they're trying to be taught remotely from parents who don't know how to do that. I think that there's a lot of fear about COVID, and that creates a lot of stress for people. And so we're holding on to a lot more anxiety than we have before. I think that you're spending a lot of time with someone that you haven't had as much time with them before, and you don't have the same support system that you had before. And so if you've had an argument, it doesn't just, you get to go to work the next day 8 hours away from each other and kind of let that simmer down and come back together. And I'm hopeful that in those situations that once we can kind of get back to normal life, that people can find their way back together through that. But then there are times when people have just been holding on for the sake of the family or for the sake of a marriage. And COVID was just definitely the straw that broke the camel's back. And I think that probably would have inevitably happened anyway. And I'm hopeful that for those people that they will end up happier in the end, even though it feels like a tremendous loss right now. But just going ahead and taking the plunge and realizing that your life means something and that your happiness means something, and staying in a marriage where you have tried everything to make it work and it just cannot, with you being happy or with you being yourself. And so if that kind of pushed that forward, then that's not necessarily a bad thing.
I could see that we still have a problem. And then, Summer, you mentioned that you might move to a better location. Can you do that? Yeah, because we still have a delay when the voice comes. But meanwhile, while we are talking about that, so Tiffany, you had a very good insight on also what causes people to split during COVID. Because people did not have, they did not develop a habit or a healthy skill to take care of each other, to be together, to spend time together, meaningful time, right? Rather than just hi, bye, and then people are off to work, or people are off to see their friends. But so how can you advise us, and Candy, of course, and Scott, how can we advise people at this time to develop that skill of kind of maintaining not just simply a good marriage, but really meaningful relationship that will last, especially when children are grown up and people become empty nesters. It's another huge syndrome that people have to cope with. So how could you advise us, people who watch us, how can we help people to stay married? And of course, in our case today, we talk about divorces, but also maybe while I see Summer move to another location and maybe you have a better sound. I'm glad that you're back. So how could it be managed better, especially when we have situations like now that make people, yeah, go ahead.
I think that people have to be really in tune with their feelings and not just kind of bury things. I can say that with my own children, I'm spending so much more time with them that at points I have to say to them, I need a 5-minute break. Like, I'm getting very anxious or I'm getting very upset right now, and I need 5 minutes to myself. And they have been very receptive, and they're children. They're 9, and my 9-year-old has autism, and I have a 3-year-old daughter. But they're very receptive to me just being open that I need some time by myself, or I think communication is key. And if you are having problems with that, and that can't be something that you can fix, there are telemed available. All of the insurance companies are making telemed available. You can get on there. You can do family counseling. You can meet with the people from your church or family members. There's Zoom, all kinds of things. You could create groups to kind of talk about the issues that you're having and seeing how other people are dealing with them. But I think that just really staying in tune with your own feelings, and then also making sure that you're not blaming the other people in the household for all of your anxiety and for all of your tension, and taking responsibility for what's yours, and then letting the other person know about your feelings, and not just about your feelings, but what you need from them to make it better for you.
So what you're talking about is a better communication.
Yes.
Better communication is a great skill, yeah.
And seeking help if you need it.
Absolutely, yes.
It's an easy thing to say and a very hard thing to do, especially if you've been in a marriage for a while and you kind of have your roles. And then with this change, it's different to change your communication style. And so you may need to meet with a counselor or a clergy person or something that can help you get over that to where you can learn a new communication style. And then also be receptive of what your partner is going through too, because that might be a very stressful day for them. I mean, bills aren't getting paid sometimes, and people are, having food insecurities, and they're having housing insecurities, and people react to that differently. But that doesn't change like the core of who you are and the core of your relationship. It's temporary. And I think that we all need to remind ourselves that this is a temporary situation and that the reactions to it are also temporary. Well, you may notice that once it's over, you do need to work on those issues that came up, but realizing that this is temporary, I think, is very important.
Tiffany, you made a good point about.
That is very helpful. Yeah.
Tiffany, you made a good point about telemed and seeking help. We had a counselor on the program a couple weeks ago, and he had made the observation that his practice has actually expanded to people that he might not otherwise see, because now he can reach them over the internet. So if you're out in a rural area, it's not a trivial thing to drive to a larger city to see a counselor or a therapist. Now it's pretty easily done if you can adjust to doing it over the internet.
Right.
Yeah.
And another
That's
thing
very
is
true.
that not every counselor is right for every couple. And
Right.
so a lot of times the counselor that was close to you that you could go to wasn't the right counselor for you. And so now with telemed, you have the opportunity to seek a counselor. And if you don't feel that that's the right counselor for you, then you can seek out a different one. And so I think it's given you a greater option of counselors. And I think that there are still ways to rely on your friends and family and bring them into the issues without kind of talking behind your partner's back. But by doing like a Zoom like this and just talking about how family's going and what issues you're having, like you would do in your normal everyday life before COVID, but making it to where you still have that family dynamic and your support, but you're just doing it through Zoom or online opportunities that you have.
We mentioned something. I just want go ahead, Candy. Then I will.
No, well, the only thing I did want to say, because none of us got married with the idea that we were going to get a divorce. And Tiffany, I don't want you or Summer to think in any way we're saying, why did you get divorced? Because absolutely there are times when you cannot make it work. And there are people out there that maybe it's not just a matter of they're not coping with one another. It just wasn't right and it's not going to work. And so I don't want to leave anyone with that impression that we would be judging that. And so I don't know if you have anything, Summer, do you have anything to say to that, or Tiffany? I just don't want to make you feel lesser because it couldn't work.
No, good. Thank you, Candy. This is a very good comment. Thank you.
Yeah,
Summer?
I didn't feel that way, but it is good to be reminded of that. And I wanted to add something, I think, just along those lines of like communication, which is really good to communicate, but I think something that happens, and like I know that you're a pastor, Lydia, and I'm oftentimes, unfortunately, in the church, not always, but sometimes I think the church can, what's what I'm looking for, brush over things that are actually domestic violence issues or issues of, power and control. And so I think sometimes with the lockdown situation like this, there's a lot of couples who they think, oh, we just, we don't get along or we don't talk. But then when they're put in a pressure cooker, they realize, actually, no, there's abuse happening. And in that case, communication isn't going to fix that. And so just for those people, like, you need to find a way to get out and to get safe. Because, that's important to note. I think that trying to talk out issues where there's any kind of violence and power dynamics can
Yeah.
actually just exacerbate the issue.
Sure. Yeah.
No,
And
and
I
I'm
think it's
sorry if I made it seem like I was saying that at all. I don't believe that communication is
no.
the key to all problems. And I think that anytime that there's domestic violence issues, you have to make sure that you're safe. But I think that anytime that parents are getting to a point of divorce, I think that they have already put themselves through the gamut. I think that you want to stay as a family unit. I know that me personally, I wanted to keep the family unit together. And I kept flipping back between these two sides of, one, I need to be happy and I need to be in a relationship where I'm respected and that I'm loved. And I can't live the rest of my life and die one day without feeling love from a partner. But then on the other side, I also felt like, am I choosing myself over my children? Because wouldn't it be best for my children if I stay together? And so I went back and forth on that for literally years because I never wanted to feel like I was choosing myself. But what I ended up realizing was that I was depriving my children of me.
Yes.
Because I wasn't happy and they weren't getting to see me, like who I truly am or who I am as a happy person. And I wasn't able to have genuine happy moments with them because I was so miserable. And so if that's happening, I finally found that for me and for my family and my children, that this was the best road for me to take. And it was extremely difficult. And I don't know how I let it go on for years. I kind of, I hate that I let that happen. But now that I look back on it, I think that I would have always wondered, I would have always had those questions. And so making sure that I had really just got down to like their last shred of, I deserve something too. I'm a human. And once I realized that, and that I could still be a good mom and that their father being in the home wasn't going to dictate their life. It was definitely going to be an obstacle that was there, but we were just going to have to take that on as the family because I had to be better. I had to be me and I had to be happy, and my kids needed better from me. So
Absolutely. And it's interesting what you just brought up, Tiffany and Summer, because I remember how I did not consider myself a very a good marriage counselor because my husband knows my very first word that drops from my lips starts with the word D. When I do counseling and I hear these arguments and anger and whatever I try does not work, I immediately say, why don't you just get a divorce? And I know that it is maybe not professional, but I believe, like what Candy said, some marriages just has to end. Especially if I know, but I'm not afraid of that because this is my style of counseling. I kind of offer the alternative option, which is very radical. And some couples just get kind of shaken and no, we are not here for that. But I think when you bring up that option, that why are you together? Why are you torturing each other? And I like what Tiffany you said. Like, what if I'm thinking more about myself? Unfortunately, our society always kind of takes the side of a husband. Even when we do act like, okay, woman is important and women's rights are very, very important, almost like a priority, the truth is it is not. And usually when divorce happens, people look down at a woman. Because it's like we are like a nest protectors. We're supposed to keep our family. I'm divorced myself. This Scott is my second husband. And I think this is the best thing that happened to me. And I could see myself grown, and I can see it's painful for children. It was really painful, especially since we moved at the same time to the United States, and it was just such a separation from everything familiar. But at the same time now, so many years passed, and I look back and I thought, I'm so happy it happened. So I hope both of you will be really looking back thinking I made the best decision because now I found myself, I'm whole. And nobody looks down at me. But Summer brought up something very important about church. and Tiffany as well. But Summer, since we all go to church, when couples split, it's an interesting dynamic. As a minister, I notice it's like a second divorce, right? Could you say a little more about that? Because one of the spouses has to leave the church, though some spouses try to kind of sort of out of revenge come back, and that affects the congregation. So, but the problem is that since men usually act so decently in public, so nobody in the congregation would even assume that a man is, for example, a spouse is an alcoholic, an addict, or an abuser, right? So all the fighting happens in the car prior the church service and after the church service. So before and post service. So but my concern, first of all, is how does it affect a relationship with the congregation where both have friends? But my second question will be about children. When you say that, am I thinking more about myself? I'm just thinking about how bad it is for children to see this dishonesty, that parents will argue in a car, or the mom will be abused or humiliated, but then the father acts so charmingly around friends and around the church members, and such a charm, and everybody like, oh, why did you divorce him? He's such a wonderful man. Sure. So who wants to answer that
Oh boy.
question? Remember, my first word is always divorce.
So we spent, when we were in Canada, we were actually church planted for a while. We led Bible studies, and Christ loved to preach, and he would be like an itinerant preacher, or we would go to churches and he would step in for the pastor. So church and our Christianity was a really big part of our life. When we came back to St. Joe, the church that I started going to, we went together. It wasn't just me, but their ideas were a little bit like more what he would call liberal, and that they felt a little more egalitarian, and like women can like actually have rights and don't have to obey their husbands all the time. So in my situation, he wasn't 100% comfortable at that church from the get-go because of those kinds of things and other things. So when the separation happened, he was happy to go find a church that more lined up with his beliefs on women being obedient and other issues as well. So I was like, I invited him to stay at church with us. I thought it might be nice actually to go to church as a family, and to try to, because you can sit in the same pew together with your children, no problem. But in my situation, he wanted a church that lined up with his beliefs. And it's been interesting because I've had conversations now with my older kids. They ask a lot of questions about how come dad believes, what do you believe? Why does he believe this about women? What do you believe about women? And I have a daughter who's 13, and I am so thankful that I can tell her how I feel, what I'm learning. And as much as divorce sucks, I'm really thankful that she gets to watch me be independent and brave, and I can teach her these things now. And I never slander what her dad believes. I say everyone has their own spiritual journey and their own path, and you don't have to pick. You just observe and take your faith and make it your own. And just because we don't agree about the details doesn't mean that we both don't love God and we both don't love you. We just all have our own journey. So that's my experience with church.
Well said. I love that. Very well said.
Yes.
And I think it kind of depends on the dynamics of the divorce. And so if it's tumultuous, probably the person who was being more of the aggressor is going to be the one to keep the church and the friends, because it's going to be the one who needs the separation that's going to just give up on those things and just say, you can have them all and I'll go find my own, I think, by the time you're at that point. And you're right. Even though you're divorced and you're separated, there are relationships where you could sit at the same church together and that would be perfectly okay. and you could share birthday parties and Christmas and everything like that. But for me, I actually started realizing that incorporating their father into every event that we had took the joy of every event we had from me. And so I needed to make my own path. And I know a lot of churches have different times where they have services. And so it doesn't mean that you have to necessarily leave the church. You may just have to attend a different service, which would be
different, yeah.
fine. But I also believe, somewhere I'm just, from listening to you, I believe that you and your husband have vast differences on the rights of women and how women should be treated. And I just want to say that in my personal opinion, and I'm not a professional in this area, but I believe that it's okay to say to your children that you believe that the parent is wrong in one issue or another. I have done that with my children. Like, I believe the way that your father spoke to you was wrong. And this is going to be something that happens. And here's how you can deal with it as a child. And I encourage them to speak to their father whenever he has crossed one line or another with them or spoke to them inappropriately, what I thought, or if they've come to me crying because their feelings are hurt. And I try to teach them their own voice and how to advocate for themselves, because obviously I'm not going to be able to fix their relationship, but that relationship needs to be fixed. And so I'm trying to teach them how to advocate for themselves. So I don't think that saying like, I think that in that particular situation, that was the wrong way to handle it. I think that you should discuss that with your father, and, we will continue to pray about it. I will be here for you. But I don't think that saying that some behavior is wrong is bad for children.
That is the line.
Absolutely.
Sorry, that
Go
is the
ahead,
line
Summer.
I had to learn to walk, because on the one hand, part of the good that comes out of a divorce is you're showing your children these behaviors aren't acceptable to accept in a relationship.
Right.
And
Right.
you're modeling that. So I came to the conclusion that if I leave the relationship for that reason, and yet I continue to make excuses for those very behaviors, kind of what's the point? So yes, like you said, Tiffany, but to walk that line between going, I actually just said the other day, I said, I don't agree with this decision. Here's why. I feel like it was disrespectful to me, but your dad and I are still your parents. We both still love you. I'm not putting you in the middle, but I do feel like that was disrespectful to me. And so, but yeah, it is hard to walk that line. It really is.
It definitely
Absolutely.
is. Our line was so hard that we actually had to go to post counseling about how to co-parent, because, I should say that at that time we didn't know that my son was autistic, but I knew that something was wrong, and his father did not. And his father thought it was a disciplinary issue, and I knew that there was something wrong. So I was definitely pushing for medical intervention and trying to figure out what the bottom line was. And his father thought that just being more strict and being more like military style was what he needed. And so it was actually much later that we ended up finding out that it was autism. Wow. And then we had to go to counseling, and a lot of the damage had already been done. And so my son, he was not being emotional about his father at all, but then he would just cry to me so much about it. And I would say, you really need to talk to your father about this. And so they finally got to have a conversation, and Jackson told his father, the reason that I don't see you very often, or that I don't interact with in children language, the reason I don't interact with you a lot, or that I don't hug you goodbye, is because I feel like the reason that you've been mean to me in my life is because you want me to be really strong. And so I'm trying to be really strong for you and not embarrass you. Mm-hmm. Wow. And then that created a wonderful opportunity for his dad to say, that's not why I did that. I wasn't mean to you because of that. I wasn't trying to teach you something. I did a bad thing. I didn't have all the information. I made bad decisions, and I'm sorry. And so, I just think that in every situation, there's intricacies to it. And you just honestly have to start trusting yourself as a person and as a mother and as a parent to know what's best for your children. And also, I think counseling helped a lot, because I think, whenever we've had this debate so much about whether there was something wrong or whether it was a discipline issue, I think that it put a lot on me that I was crazy and that I was seeing things that weren't there and I was overreacting. And I think I internalized that and then kind of lost a little bit of my gut feelings. And so I had to learn to get those back and to trust them. And so that was really important for me.
I think what I hear today is that divorce is actually when it happens in a healthy way, and both partners try to have their children as a priority, but also themselves as individuals. So what I see that will come out of this kind of healthily managed divorce and counseling, that it is a post-divorce relationship when children will benefit from having both parents. Because I think what we want to have as women, that our children have their fathers and they have their relationship with the fathers for life. But I think also it is for those men who are not maybe now a good husbands, but we want them to be good parents, and also to grow out of this divorce experience, because divorce is like sort of a death of a relationship. And some people go back, but some people don't. Majority doesn't. But so that means that a person who was left out because this man did not maybe act in a way that was expected from a good husband, then hopefully that will be a good opportunity to grow. And then through children to prove that, yes, I'm a better man now, and maybe in the future marriage, but it's always so painful during the divorce. And that's why I really appreciate both Summer and Tiffany sharing with us today. Because when people now during COVID lose many things, relationship, marriages, houses, businesses, jobs, money, and of course their loved ones, because there is lots of death that we see now. So I just really admire your strength. And in the end, I want to ask you a question that we always ask our guests. What do you see positive in the COVID? Because even because of your strength, I could see that there are lots of positive things that happen. I know Summer Echo is recording on Facebook and online with people she never met, and enjoys that. And I encourage people to get on her Facebook page and listen to that. And I hope, Summer, you will place more recordings. And then Tiffany, of course, you're such a help to people who, especially when you help pro bono, I know, but also to have a person like this who is trustworthy, who has a personal experience with divorces, but also with drug addiction or alcohol addiction, that you counsel those people and help them to get out. So what is a good thing about this time that maybe we need to acknowledge today and not get that severely depressed, because we can handle it? So could you answer that question? What is a good side of COVID?
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily a good side of COVID, but I think for me, back in March, before we even really knew what was going on, this was like early March, I was out and I went to this little cabin and I was just having some prayer time. And I was wondering, I was like, I could tell something was happening. No one really knew what. And as I was praying and praying and praying, and I felt like I heard, God give me kind of a word and speak to me like he does, not, necessarily thunderbolts and lightning, but I had this word come to me. And at the time it didn't make sense, because I was like, well, wait, isn't there like some kind of a pandemic? What does this have to do with a pandemic? But the word was just a scripture, and it just said, seek peace and pursue it. And then blessed are the peacemakers. Over and over, that's all I heard was just blessed are the peacemakers. And one thing that during all of this, yes, the virus is horrible, but I think the greatest tragedy right now that I see is all the division that it's causing between people, and that doesn't need to happen. And I feel like, I know the good thing is just that we really can find peace in this, and we can find unity in this. We can come together in this, but we have to stop making this about us versus them. We have to stop
Absolutely.
making this
Amen.
a Democrat
Absolutely.
Republican issue. You know, and I think if we do that, we can really come together as people and love each other through this and grow through this. So I guess that's both an encouragement and an admonition. Just
And
Good. Thank you.
for me, I just want to say that I was very fortunate to be paid even whenever we were at home working. Pretty much everything had shut down. And so for weeks I had with my children and I was still getting paid. But being a lawyer, that is long, hard hours, and that's coming home and working in the evenings. And so I just think that the only time I had really been able to spend that amount of time with my children was whenever I was on maternity leave, which means that they were infants. And it was so nice to be able to be the dominant part of my children's life, to know what was happening with them every minute, every day. And I got to learn so much more about them, and they got to learn so much more about me. And I think we got to build like a better connection. And I'm actually really, really grateful for that time, because I don't know that I would have ever had that had this not happened.
Absolutely. Thank you. And many parents experience the same thing. And couples, when it is good, it is good. And of course, we have so many parents who are so burned out, running children from one event to another event pre-COVID. And now, of course, the parents spend more time with their children. So this is amazing. We wish you luck. We wish you all the blessings that you both deserve. Thank you, Summer, for your time. And thank you, Tiffany, for your time, and Candy and Scott, because we need to have positive messages during this time, but also have a reality check that, yes, we sometimes just really get too angry, and maybe our own situation makes us angry, but we somehow project it on our people. And this is so, it should not happen. So let's stay together, like Summer says, let's stay united. And listen to other people, accept other people, because we are all in this together, and our goal is to not just survive, but to get on another end of this pandemic as better people.
Right.
People who are
Absolutely.
whole, people who are healthy. And so I hope I'll see you each Summer at Marco Polo one day, and Tiffany in
Yeah,
person
come out.
too. Yes, right. So I will announce, right. I will announce quickly our next event, which will be number 30. And Carrie Herndon will be our guest, and she is environmental protection specialist, has a passion for nature, for traveling, and she is just outstanding person to learn from how to cope and how to have this amazing life in nature, surrounded by quietness and water and mountains. But also she has a very high expectations of people to be together, to trust each other, and she's a very good listener. So I invite you to join us next Saturday at 5 p.m. And so thank you so much to everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.